before I dive into this incredible story, I want to know where you're watching from. Drop your city or country in the comments below. I'd love to see where my audience is from. And hey, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button because this is a story you don't want to miss. Trust me. Now picture this. You're at the playground enjoying a quiet afternoon with your children. For a parent, it's one of the simplest joys in life, right? But what if I told you that this moment, a moment of pure innocence, was about to be shattered by a woman so cruel, so heartless, that she'd pull a gun on your daughter for standing up for her disabled brother? Sounds unreal? Well, it's not. This happened to me, and today I'm about to share with you the full story of how my 7-year-old daughter Emma was shot at the playground, simply for defending her brother Marcus, who has cerebral palsy. I know. This may sound like the start of some terrible nightmare, but this is all too real. And the worst part? The woman responsible wasn't just some random stranger. She was the president of our HOA, a woman whose job was to enforce community rules. But instead, she turned her power into something dangerous, into something deadly. How far can one woman go to make a family's life miserable? How do you handle the unimaginable when the person who harms your family is someone who's supposed to be in charge of your community? Well, I'm here to tell you exactly what happens when you push a parent too far. So, sit tight, grab some popcorn, and be ready for a story filled with pain, rage, and ultimately, justice. And remember, if you want to hear how it all went down, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the next part of this journey. You won't want to miss what happens next. The autumn sun hung low in the sky, casting a warm golden hue over Meadowbrook Community's playground that Tuesday afternoon. It was one of those rare moments when the world felt still, peaceful, and right. I was parked by the curb watching through the windshield of my car, a soft smile tugging at my lips. My 7-year-old daughter Emma was pushing her 9-year-old brother Marcus on the swing. I could hear the laughter, Marcus's joyful giggles filling the air. He was swinging higher and higher, his face lit up with that innocent, carefree smile of a child lost in a moment of pure joy. A child who wasn't thinking about limitations, about the wheelchair that he relied on to get around. He was just a boy on a swing, enjoying the breeze in his face. And to me, that was everything. Marcus had cerebral palsy, a condition that made even the simplest tasks more challenging for him. But there was nothing about that moment that felt difficult. His laughter was pure, untainted by the struggles he faced every day. To me, moments like this were rare treasures, beautiful, fleeting, and fragile. Watching him swing, seeing him so happy, I realized how precious these moments were. Emma, small and strong, stood at the base of the swing, gripping the chains with determination as she pushed her brother higher. Her blonde pigtails bounced with each effort, and the look of concentration on her face made me smile. She was always there for him, like a little protector, always making sure Marcus had the same chance to enjoy life as any other child. She giggled, urging him to go higher. "Come on, Marcus. Higher! We're gonna touch the sky!" Her voice was full of that beautiful childhood innocence, that confidence that the world was still full of endless possibilities. Her joy was contagious, and I felt a rush of pride for both of them. They were my everything. I glanced at my watch. Just 10 more minutes before we'd need to head back home for Marcus's physical therapy session. My phone buzzed with a few work emails, but I ignored them. This was family time. The kind of time that was sacred, untouchable. The kind of time that made everything else fade away. I let out a deep breath, watching as Marcus's giggles rang out once more. For that brief moment, there was no fight with the HOA, no worries about tomorrow. There was just us, together. My children, laughing, playing, enjoying life, free from the cruel judgments of the world. But I didn't know how quickly that peace would shatter. I didn't know that someone was watching. Someone who wouldn't let my children be children. Someone whose heart was full of hate. Can you relate to these moments of quiet joy with your loved ones? What's a moment you've shared that made you feel like the world stood still? Karen Whitmore was a force to be reckoned with in Meadowbrook. I'd heard the rumors before she even took office as the new HOA president. People said she was strict, uptight, and had an obsessive need to control every little detail in the neighborhood. I wasn't sure if it was true, but I soon found out that it was, and then some. She was the type of person who could turn a simple neighborhood rule into a full-blown crusade. If it was written on one of those bylaws pages, it was law in her eyes. No exceptions, no compassion. And God forbid you did something she didn't like, even if it was something as innocent as parking your car too close to the curb or putting out your trash 15 minutes too late. Karen had her eyes everywhere, always with that ever-present clipboard of hers, checking boxes, jotting down complaints, taking notes on who was in compliance with her vision of a perfect neighborhood. She was tall, with short silver-streaked hair that she always wore pulled back tightly, as if everything about her had to be in its rightful place. Her clothes were always perfectly pressed, nothing ever out of place, much like the woman herself. Her eyes were sharp, calculating, and when she looked at you, you could feel the judgment before she even spoke. I first met her at one of the community meetings when she had just started as HOA president. I remember the way she stood at the front of the room, eyes scanning everyone like a hawk, ready to pounce on anyone who dared step out of line. She didn't ask for input. She told you what to do, and if you didn't do it, there would be consequences. At first, her rules seemed harmless. Too many leaves on the lawn? Get fined. No hanging laundry to dry in the yard? Get fined. But soon those little annoyances turned into something far worse. She came after my family for the smallest things. The first real run-in happened when we left our trash bins out just a bit too long after pickup time. She sent us a warning letter, but it didn't stop there. No, that was only the beginning. Then she turned her attention to our wheelchair ramp. I had installed it a few months earlier to make Marcus's life a little easier, and for a while it was just a simple solution. But Karen saw it as a blight on the neighborhood, a symbol of imperfection. According to her, it decreased property values. I was livid. How could a mother, someone who was supposed to care for people, make such a cruel, thoughtless comment about a child's disability? But it wasn't just words. No, she filed a complaint with the city, demanding that we tear the ramp down. She said it wasn't aesthetically pleasing. I had to fight for months just to keep it up, and that was only the start. Over the following weeks, Karen ramped up her harassment. She measured the length of our grass with a ruler and threatened to fine us for being 1 to 4 inches over the limit. Then came the letter about our driveway, claiming that the concrete slab needed to be replaced because it didn't match the neighborhood standard, as if our driveway was her business. There were so many complaints, I lost count. Every time I thought we were free of her, she found something new to target. Our yard, the flowers we planted, even the type of bird feeder we hung. It was like she had nothing better to do than to make our lives miserable. But this time? The playground incident? That was the breaking point. Karen couldn't let my children just be children. She couldn't see past her rules to the love and care we put into our family. And that's when she made the biggest mistake of all. She crossed a line no one should ever cross. Have you ever dealt with a Karen? What's the worst experience you've had? Drop your stories in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. I had just started walking toward the playground when I heard her voice. Excuse me? Karen's shrill tone cut through the air, sharp and commanding. I froze, instinctively knowing what was coming. Emma, still grinning as she pushed Marcus higher on the swing, turned at the sound of Karen's voice. Her smile faded immediately, a look of unease crossing her face as she recognized the woman who had made our lives miserable for months. I could already feel my blood pressure rise. I was halfway across the playground, but Karen wasn't even looking at me. She was staring at Marcus, her eyes narrowed in disdain, her lips twisting into a sneer. "You there, girl?" Karen barked at Emma, her finger jabbing the air toward the sign near the playground entrance. "This playground has rules. Where is your parent?" Emma, clearly caught off guard, pointed over at me. "My daddy's right there," but Karen wasn't done. She glanced at me for a split second and then turned back to Emma and Marcus, her gaze lingering on Marcus with an intensity that made my stomach churn. "And that boy shouldn't even be here," she spat, her words dripping with contempt. My heart skipped a beat. I knew exactly what she meant. Time seemed to slow. I could hear the creak of the swing chains and the distant sound of children laughing, but all I could focus on was Karen's cold, judgmental eyes and the venom in her voice. She wasn't even pretending to be civil anymore. "This playground is for normal children," she continued, her voice loud and steady. He's a safety hazard. What if he falls? What if he drools on the equipment? It's unsanitary. I'm calling security to have you both removed. Emma's face crumpled as her heart sank. She knew exactly what that meant. My sweet girl, who had always been the protector, the one who never hesitated to stand up for her brother, suddenly looked vulnerable. I saw the change in her face, a mix of confusion, hurt, and fear. She was only 7, but she understood what Karen was saying. Her brother wasn't welcome. He didn't belong here. I broke into a run. "That's enough!" I shouted, my voice cutting through the air, fierce and full of anger. "You have no right to speak to my children like that." Karen turned toward me, her eyes flashing with the same venom she'd directed at Marcus. "Oh, it's you," she sneered. "The father who thinks rules don't apply to his family." She glared at me with such hatred that I could feel the rage starting to boil over inside me. I closed the distance between us quickly, positioning myself between her and my kids. "No, let me tell you something," I said, my voice low but unwavering. "My son has every right to use this playground." Karen's lips curled into a mocking smile. "The Americans with Disabilities Act?" She scoffed, as if the mere mention of laws protecting my child's rights was some kind of joke. "Don't quote laws at me. I'm the HOA president here. I make the rules. And I say that boy is a liability." My heart pounded in my chest, and I could feel the anger rising within me, hot and uncontrollable. But I couldn't lose control, not here, not in front of my children. Emma, her small hands still gripping the swing's chains, had already climbed off and was standing beside Marcus, her arms wrapped protectively around him. I saw her eyes wide and full of confusion. She was too young to understand how someone could be so cruel, especially to her brother. I looked at her, my heart breaking. "Come on, kids," I said softly, my voice cracking as I reached for Marcus's wheelchair handles. "We're leaving!" Karen's voice followed us like a bitter wind. "That's right. Run away," she called after us, her tone dripping with satisfaction. "And don't come back. Next time I see that wheelchair here, I'll call the police." I couldn't speak. The words were there, just on the tip of my tongue, but I couldn't trust myself to say them. If I did, I knew I would explode in anger. Anger I couldn't afford to show. Not here. Not with my kids looking at me. As I pushed Marcus toward the car, I glanced down at Emma. Her face was already wet with tears. "Daddy," she whispered, her voice small and hurt. "Why was that lady so mean?" "Marcus didn't do anything wrong." "I know, sweetheart," I said quietly, my chest tightening with emotion. Some people have darkness in their hearts, but we won't let her steal our joy, okay?" But even as I said it, I could see the pain in her eyes. The innocence in her was starting to slip away. She was beginning to understand that some people in this world didn't see Marcus the way she did. Didn't see him as her loving, beautiful brother, but as something different, something less. That moment, as we walked toward the car, I felt a cold weight in my chest. It wasn't just that Karen had attacked my children. No, this was something deeper. It was the realization that the world my daughter and son had known was about to change forever. And I wasn't sure if I could protect them from what was coming. What would you do if you saw someone picking on your family like this? How far would you go to protect your loved ones? Let me know in the comments. It happened in the blink of an eye. I had just settled Marcus into his wheelchair and was about to reach for Emma when I heard it, the sharp sound of metal scraping against metal. I froze, my stomach twisting. I turned just in time to see Karen pull something out from beneath her jacket. A gun. For a moment, everything went still. My mind couldn't process it, couldn't comprehend what I was seeing. This wasn't happening. Not here, not now. But it was. Karen's eyes, wild with rage, locked onto Emma. I barely had time to react before Karen's arm shot out, the gun raised, the barrel pointing directly at my little girl. I saw Emma freeze, her face contorting with confusion and fear, her small hand still gripping Marcus's wheelchair, holding on as if that would somehow protect her from what was coming. "No!" I screamed, but it was too late. The gunshot rang out, sharp and deafening. It was like a slap to the face, a brutal shock that sent my entire body into overdrive. Time seemed to stretch, the world slowing down, the sound of the shot echoing in my ears. Emma collapsed to the ground with a sickening thud, her body crumpling as the bullet tore through her shoulder. The blood blossomed, dark and red against the playground's bright colors, and I couldn't breathe. My heart stopped as I saw her lying there, motionless for a split second. "Emma!" I screamed, the word coming out in a strangled cry. Chaos erupted. The peaceful playground, once filled with the innocent sounds of children laughing and playing, was now filled with screams and panic. Parents rushed in from all directions, their faces pale with shock, their voices rising in a frantic mix of confusion and terror. Children were crying, some running toward the exit, others huddling behind the equipment in fear. The swing set creaked in the background as the noise of the world came crashing down. Karen stood there, still holding the gun, her face a mask of fury and madness, not even flinching as the screams echoed around her. It was as if the shot hadn't even fazed her. The power, the control, the satisfaction of causing pain. It was all that mattered to her now. I didn't know what was happening, only that I had to get to Emma. My legs felt like lead, but somehow I forced myself to run. My body moved on instinct, my heart pounding so loudly in my chest I could barely hear the chaos around me. All I could focus on was Emma, her small body lying there, blood spreading across the ground beneath her. When I reached her, the world seemed to collapse into a single moment of pure, unfathomable terror. I dropped to my knees beside her, my hands shaking as I touched her face. "Emma, baby, I'm here," I whispered, but she didn't respond. Her eyes were wide, but there was no recognition in them. She was in shock, shock that I couldn't fix with a touch, shock that I couldn't undo with my voice. "Daddy, it hurts," she whimpered, her voice so small, so fragile. I could barely breathe. Her voice cut through me like a knife. She was hurt. My little girl, the one I swore I'd always protect, was lying on the ground, bleeding, and I was helpless. "Emma, stay with me," I urged, my hand brushing her hair back from her forehead, my heart breaking. I looked around, searching for help. "Someone help!" I shouted. But there was no time. I could see Linda, Sophie's mom, kneeling beside Emma, her hands pressed against Emma's shoulder where the blood poured from the wound. She was crying, muttering frantic words, but I couldn't focus on her. I couldn't focus on anything but my daughter, my sweet, brave girl who had just been shot for standing up to a bully. I turned my head, searching for Karen, but she was gone. The playground was now a scene of utter chaos. Parents gathered around Emma, some trying to help, others holding their phones, calling 911. But Karen was nowhere to be seen. She had vanished into the crowd, slipping away without even a second glance at the damage she had caused. I looked down at Emma again, her small body trembling beneath my hands. I couldn't let her slip away from me. I couldn't let that happen. "Don't leave me, baby," I whispered, my voice cracking. "Don't leave me!" The sound of sirens filled the air, and within moments paramedics were rushing toward us. They pushed me aside gently, quickly assessing Emma's injuries as they cut away her shirt. I could barely keep myself together. I was watching my daughter, the love of my life, being worked on like she was just another casualty, just another victim. But she wasn't. She was my child. She was my everything. "Through and through," one of the paramedics said, his voice oddly calm despite the chaos. "Lucky it didn't hit any major arteries or bone." Lucky? Lucky? My daughter had been shot and they were calling her lucky? I couldn't understand it. I couldn't make sense of it. But one thing was clear. Karen had gone too far. This wasn't a random act of violence. This was a calculated decision. She had aimed at my child, and she had fired without hesitation. She had meant to hurt us. As the paramedics worked on Emma, trying to stabilize her, I turned to the officer who had approached me. "Where is she?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Where is Karen?" The officer looked at me, his face tight with sympathy. "She ran, sir. We've already called for backup. We'll find her." I couldn't think. I couldn't breathe. But I knew one thing for sure. Karen Whitmore was going to pay for this. No matter how long it took, no matter what it cost. Can you imagine witnessing such a horrifying event? What would you do if you were in my shoes, watching your child suffer like this? Let me know in the comments below. The moment the paramedics loaded Emma into the ambulance, My world went numb. My legs felt like they were made of stone, but somehow I managed to move. I could barely process anything, nothing except the sight of my daughter, her face pale and covered in blood, her small body trembling as they rushed her to the hospital. I followed the ambulance to the hospital, the sirens blaring in the background like a constant reminder of what had just happened. Every minute felt like an eternity, and as I sat there in the passenger seat, I couldn't think. I couldn't breathe. My mind was racing, but there were only two thoughts that kept pushing to the surface. One, my daughter had been shot. And two, Karen Whitmore was the one who had done it. The rage inside me was building, choking me. I had dealt with criminals before, dangerous men, cartel leaders, people who hurt others for a living. I'd stood face to face with some of the worst people in the world, but none of them, not a single one, had ever made me feel this way. This wasn't just another case. This wasn't just a faceless criminal in some far-off part of the world. This was Karen Whitmore, the woman who had made our lives hell for months. The woman who had looked at my daughter and decided that she wasn't worthy of being in a public park because of her disability. I'd been a federal agent for 15 years. I'd seen violence, hatred, and evil in every shape and form, but nothing had prepared me for this. Nothing had prepared me for the sight of my daughter, lying in a pool of her own blood because of the cruelty of someone who was supposed to be a leader in our community. As the ambulance came to a screeching halt at the hospital, I rushed out of the car before it had even stopped. The doors to the emergency room opened, and I could hear the beeping of monitors, the frantic movement of doctors and nurses as they tried to stabilize Emma. My legs were shaky, but I forced myself to stay calm. I couldn't lose it, not yet. Not with Emma in that room, fighting for her life. I needed to focus, to be strong. I needed to get her through this. But as I paced the waiting room, the anger inside me kept rising. My mind kept replaying the moment Karen pulled the trigger, the moment she chose to hurt my daughter. I couldn't shake it. The way she stood there, emotionless, as she pulled that gun out of her purse like it was just another tool in her arsenal. The look of satisfaction on her face when she saw Emma fall. That image kept looping in my mind, over and over again. It made my blood boil. I wanted to run to her, find her, and make her feel the same terror she'd put my daughter through. I was so close to losing myself to that rage, to letting it consume me, but I knew I had to hold it together. For Emma. For Marcus. I knew what I had to do. Emma was in surgery for hours, the doctors doing everything they could to repair the damage. The bullet had torn through her shoulder, missing vital arteries and bones by mere inches. She was lucky in that sense, but the trauma, both physical and emotional, would take a lot longer to heal. I couldn't fix that. I couldn't undo what had been done, but I could make sure Karen Whitmore paid for what she'd done. The hospital was buzzing with activity, but my mind was elsewhere. My years as a federal agent told me that this wouldn't be a simple case. Karen wasn't just going to let this go. She'd likely try to cover her tracks. Maybe she'd claim self-defense. Maybe even say Emma was the aggressor. She had to know that what she'd done was unforgivable. I needed to act fast. As soon as I was able, I pulled out my phone and started dialing. First, I called my partner Martinez at the ATF. He picked up after the second ring. "Martinez," he said, his voice steady. "I need everything on Karen Whitmore." "Now," I said, my voice tight with anger. "She's the one who shot my daughter." There was a pause on the other end, then a sharp intake of breath. "Shit," he muttered. "We're on it. What do you need?" "I need her background. I need everything, her history, any complaints, any previous violations, anything that can tie her to this act. I need her address, her family history. I want to know what kind of person she is, everything." "We'll get it," he said, his voice full of determination. "Stay calm. We'll get her." I ended the call, feeling my pulse quicken again. This wasn't just about my daughter anymore. This was about stopping a woman who thought she could play God with people's lives. This was about holding her accountable for every hateful thing she had done to my family. The hours dragged on, and Emma's surgery continued. My wife, Sarah, arrived at the hospital shortly after, and when she saw Emma lying there, so small and vulnerable, I thought she might collapse. She had to be strong for Emma, just like I did. but the pain on her face, on both our faces, was more than either of us could bear. "I'm so sorry," Sarah whispered as she held Emma's hand, tears falling freely. "I never thought it would come to this." "I know," I whispered back, my voice barely audible. "But we can't let her get away with this." "I know," she said, looking up at me, her eyes filled with both fear and determination. "We'll make sure she pays for what she did, and we would." I had made up my mind. I wasn't going to let Karen Whitmore walk free. She had targeted my daughter, but she'd also targeted my family. She had crossed a line that no one should ever cross, and now she would face the consequences. What's more important to you? Justice or revenge? Let me know in the comments. I want to know your thoughts on what should happen to someone like Karen. Karen Whitmore's harassment didn't start with the shooting. Oh no, that was just the ugly crescendo in a long and painful symphony of cruelty. When Karen first became HOA president, I thought maybe we had just been unlucky. I never imagined the trouble she would cause, especially for my family. I always thought HOAs were supposed to keep things neat, enforce a few basic rules, and make sure things ran smoothly. But Karen turned it into a war, a personal vendetta against anyone who didn't fit her idea of what the neighborhood should look like. It started with our trash bins. One Sunday evening, I had left the bins out a little too long after pickup. Just 15 minutes, 15 minutes. But Karen was watching. Of course she was. She sent us a letter, an official warning, threatening a fine if we didn't adhere to the rules. I thought it was a joke at first. 15 minutes? Who could possibly care about something so trivial? But she made it clear that if we didn't comply, there would be consequences. That was the beginning of what felt like an endless barrage of petty complaints. Soon, Karen was measuring our grass with a ruler, citing us for being a quarter-inch over the acceptable length. We were fined for having a bird bath in the front yard, for leaving a lawn chair out after sunset, even for the position of our mailbox. She even came by one day to measure the distance between our driveway and the neighbor's fence to make sure it was exactly within the HOA's specs. But the real trouble began when I built Marcus's wheelchair ramp. I knew it was necessary. Marcus struggled to get in and out of the house without it. It was the right thing to do, the humane thing to do. But Karen? She didn't see it that way. To her, the ramp was an eyesore. She claimed that it ruined the aesthetic of our house and lowered the property value of the entire neighborhood. I remember the day she sent the first letter about it. She had come over to the house while I was at work, measured the ramp, and then drafted a complaint. "The ramp does not comply with HOA guidelines and will need to be removed immediately," it said. She threatened fines if we didn't tear it down. I couldn't believe it. My son, my child, needed that ramp, and she was more concerned about the look of it than his well-being. I fought back, of course. I spoke with lawyers, but all they could tell me was that HOAs had a lot of power. Fighting Karen would be a lengthy, expensive battle, and there was no guarantee we'd win. But the idea of giving in, of tearing down something that made Marcus's life easier, was never an option. So we kept the ramp up, but Karen didn't stop there. Her next move was to go after us legally. She filed complaints with the city, claiming that we were operating an unlicensed medical facility because Marcus had occasional nursing visits. She even tried to get our homeowner's insurance canceled, saying that Marcus's disability made our property high risk. She painted us as criminals in front of the community, as if we were a burden, a threat to the neighborhood's values. This was more than just an attack on our home. It was an attack on our dignity. I couldn't help but feel like she was trying to make us feel ashamed of Marcus, to make us feel like we were doing something wrong by caring for him, by giving him the help he needed to live as normally as possible. Every letter, every complaint, every threat made me more furious and more helpless at the same time. But what angered me the most was how she took it further, how she escalated it. Every small victory, every time I managed to push back or prove her wrong, only seemed to fuel her fire. Karen wasn't just going after us for minor violations. No, she was personally targeting our family, trying to make our lives as miserable as possible. She didn't see us as people. She didn't see my son as a child deserving of compassion. To her, we were just problems to be eradicated. And when she saw how much we were struggling, how much Sarah was crying at night because of the stress, How Marcus started to retreat into himself, refusing to go outside. She didn't stop. She pushed harder, her hatred becoming more personal, more toxic. But the final straw came when she tried to get us kicked out of the community entirely. I could hear it in her voice when she said it. "This is a family neighborhood, not a nursing home. Your son has no place here." That comment, that statement, stung harder than anything else she had ever said. It was a line she crossed that I couldn't ignore. And that was when I realized this wasn't just about rules. This was about power. Karen was using her position to bully us, to hurt us, and to make us feel like we didn't belong. I wasn't going to stand by and let her continue to destroy our lives. I was done. I wasn't just going to fight her on legal grounds anymore. I was going to make sure she paid for what she had done to my family. And that was before I ever knew what she would do next. Before the gunshot, before my daughter lay in a pool of her own blood, before Karen Whitmore made the mistake that would ruin her life forever. Have you ever had to deal with someone abusing their power like this? How did you handle it? Let me know in the comments below. I want to hear your stories. The sound of my phone buzzing broke the tense silence as I sat in the waiting room. Sarah beside me, her face pale and strained with worry. Emma was still in surgery, the hours dragging by in agonizing silence. Every second that passed felt like another eternity, but my mind was racing, shifting between fear for Emma's life and an uncontrollable urge for justice. I knew what had to be done. I reached for my phone, checking the caller ID. It was Martinez, my partner from the ATF. "Daniel," he said, his voice steady but filled with urgency. "We've got everything you need on Karen Whitmore." I sat up straighter, my heart pounding as I tried to focus on his words, despite the overwhelming chaos around me. "What do you have?" I asked, my voice sharp, trying to suppress the rage threatening to explode. "We pulled her file." "And it's worse than we thought," Martinez said. "Her background goes way back. This wasn't some random act. She's been involved in things before. Petty harassment, sure, but there's more. She's been building a case against your family for months. Not just you, but Marcus, too. We've found records of complaints that go beyond the HOA. She's been obsessing over your son, Daniel. She even kept a log of everything. I stood up, pacing the small waiting room. "What do you mean, obsessing?" "Not just your son's wheelchair ramp, but her thoughts on the whole family. She's been watching you for a while. She's made notes on your family's movements, taken pictures, even kept newspaper clippings on disability rights groups." I ran my hand through my hair. My stomach turned. She's been stalking us? The thought made me sick. But then it hit me. The connection, the escalation. This wasn't just about rules anymore. This was personal. "Exactly," Martinez said. "She had a manifesto. She believes in some twisted notion of purity in the neighborhood. She's been targeting people she sees as undesirables, disabled people, people who don't fit her vision of a perfect community." My blood ran cold. Karen's words at the playground echoed in my mind. This playground is for normal children. And now I knew why. She had been targeting anyone she saw as different, including my son. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. Emma had been right. She wasn't just angry about the ramp. This was about control, about trying to erase anyone who didn't fit her narrow view of the world. "What else?" I demanded, struggling to keep my emotions in check. "There's more," Martinez replied. "Karen's been preparing for this. She filed a false police report just a few days ago, claiming that your family was harassing her. She was setting up a self-defense claim, Daniel. Everything we've found points to this being premeditated. This wasn't some impulsive attack. She planned this." I felt a wave of nausea wash over me, but something else surged beneath the anger, a fierce, burning need to make her pay for what she had done. "Where is she now?" I asked, my voice low but filled with determination. "We've got officers looking for her, but she's gone underground. We've already issued an APB, and we're checking her house and the area around it. She's trying to disappear, but we won't let her." I paused, taking a deep breath, then said, "Martinez, I want everything on her, her background, her family, her associates. She won't be able to hide. I'm not stopping until I find her. You understand?" "I got you," he said, his voice firm. We'll take care of it. But Daniel, you need to be careful. Don't let your emotions cloud your judgment. I couldn't promise that. Not after what she had done. I ended the call, my mind racing. Karen had crossed a line, and now I was going to make sure she faced the consequences. But something about the investigation wasn't sitting right with me. The fact that she had been planning this for months, stalking my family, made my blood boil. And I wasn't going to rest until I brought her to justice. I paced the room, unable to sit still. Every minute, every second felt like a countdown. I wanted to be by Emma's side, but I knew that if I didn't act now, Karen might slip away, hide behind the walls she'd built for herself. I had to stop her before she did any more damage. Where is she? I whispered to myself, the words slipping from my lips without thought, and then a thought hit me. What if Karen had been planning this for much longer than we realized? What if we weren't the only family she had targeted? As the minutes dragged on, I couldn't shake that feeling of dread. If Karen had been targeting other families, if she had been using her position to hurt others in the same way, I needed to know. I needed to be sure there weren't more victims out there. But before I could call Martinez back, the door to the waiting room opened. Sarah stepped inside, her face pale and tear-streaked, but there was a small glimmer of hope in her eyes. "They're done with the surgery," she said quietly, her voice soft but filled with relief. "She's stable. Emma's going to be okay." My knees nearly gave out as I exhaled, feeling the weight of the last few hours finally lift off my chest. But as I looked at Sarah, I realized that the battle wasn't over yet. Karen Whitmore had made her move, and now it was my turn to make mine. What would you do if you found out someone had been stalking your family for months? Would you be able to stay calm, or would you seek justice right away? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. 3 weeks passed since Emma was shot. The bruises on her shoulder had started to fade, but the emotional scars were still fresh. I could see it in her eyes every time she closed them. Nightmares, fear, the ghost of that moment when Karen raised the gun. Every morning, Emma would cling to Sarah or me, hesitant to let go, even for a second. But despite the physical pain, the emotional weight on her heart was the hardest thing to bear. I wanted to protect her from the world, to shield her from the cruelty that was out there, but I knew I couldn't. All I could do was ensure that Karen Whitmore faced the consequences for what she had done. And now, it was time. The courtroom was packed with people, news cameras flashing, reporters scribbling notes in the back row. The case had become a media frenzy. Disability rights groups had picked up on the story, outraged by Karen's blatant discrimination, and they filled the gallery, making sure that everyone knew this wasn't just about one family. This was about standing up against hate, against a woman who believed she could decide who deserved to live freely in a community. Karen sat at the defense table, her once perfect hair now gray and unkempt, her face devoid of the power and confidence it once held. She looked smaller now, less sure of herself. Her orange jumpsuit, though still pristine, couldn't hide the weight of the situation she now faced. Her attorney, Robert Chen, sat beside her, his face a mask of calculated calm. I could already tell that he was going to be trouble. The type of lawyer who'd twist every word, every fact, trying to create doubt in the jury's mind. But I wasn't afraid of him. The evidence was clear, and I was determined to see Karen pay for what she had done. The prosecution team had done their homework. District Attorney Maria Gonzalez had been relentless, presenting Karen's manifesto, her false police reports, and the extensive history of harassment against our family. She even had witnesses, parents from the playground who saw everything unfold, who could attest to Karen's cruelty and the danger she had caused. The security camera footage was the most damning. I didn't watch it. I couldn't. The moment the footage of Emma standing up to Karen and getting shot played, I felt a lump form in my throat. My little girl, the way she had tried to protect her brother, standing up to a woman who should have been a role model in the community. The world had never felt more unfair. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Gonzalez said, her voice steady but filled with conviction, "you have all seen the evidence. You have heard the witnesses. The defendant, Karen Whitmore, did not act in self-defense. She acted out of hatred. Hatred for a child with a disability. hatred for a family that refused to bow to her control. And because of that hatred, a 7-year-old girl was shot in cold blood, in front of her brother, in front of a playground full of children. No one should ever be made to feel unsafe in their own community, especially not a child. We ask that you find the defendant guilty of attempted murder and assault with a deadly weapon. The courtroom was silent as Gonzalez sat down. I couldn't look at Karen, but I could feel her eyes burning into me. She had no remorse. She never would. Then it was Chen's turn. He stood up, straightened his tie, and turned to face the jury, his voice smooth and insincere. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his tone cold. "This isn't about hate. This is about fear." Karen Whitmore, a dedicated citizen of this community, was simply trying to protect her neighbors from the perceived dangers posed by a child in a wheelchair. Yes, the defendant made a mistake, but she was scared. She feared for her safety and the safety of others. We are not here to defend what happened, but we must consider the context. Fear can cloud judgment, and in this case, it led to a tragic event. But that does not mean she should be convicted of attempted murder. I clenched my fists. He was twisting the truth, spinning it into a web of lies, trying to make Karen out to be a victim in all this. Fear? It was cowardice, not fear, that made her pull the trigger. Fear wasn't what made her stalk our family, file fake complaints, and harass us for months. And when he started questioning Emma on the stand, I lost it. "Emma," Chen said, his voice dripping with condescension, "you said that Karen called your brother a liability, that she claimed he shouldn't be allowed to play in the park. Is that correct?" Emma nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes, she said that." "And you responded by calling her a bully, didn't you?" "Yes," Emma said softly, but her chin trembled. "And do you think, perhaps, that your words, your refusal to follow the rules, may have escalated the situation?" I stood up, my anger flaring, but before I could say anything, Gonzalez jumped to her feet. "Objection, Your Honor," badgering the witness. The judge, a no-nonsense woman named Judge Elizabeth Howard, quickly overruled Chen. "Sustained," she said firmly. "Move on, Mr. Chen." Emma, though visibly shaken, held her ground. "I just wanted to stand up for my brother," she said, her voice strong. "He didn't do anything wrong. He just wanted to play." The jury watched her carefully. I could see it in their faces. Some were wiping their eyes. Others had their jaws clenched in disgust. This wasn't about who said what. This was about right and wrong. And Karen had crossed that line in the worst possible way. As the trial continued, my mind raced. I wanted to confront Chen, to tell him what kind of monster he was defending. But I couldn't. Not yet. We were getting close. I could feel it. When the jury left to deliberate, I knew we were close to the end of this nightmare. But it wasn't over yet. Not until Karen paid for what she did to my daughter. What would you do if you saw someone like Chen defending someone who hurt your family? Would you stay silent or would you confront them? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. The jury had been deliberating for 4 long hours. Every minute felt like an eternity. My fingers drummed anxiously against the wooden bench as I sat beside Sarah, our hands clasped together tightly. Sarah's face was a mixture of exhaustion and hope, her eyes bloodshot from sleepless nights spent by Emma's side. We had been through so much already, but the weight of waiting for a decision was unbearable. I glanced over at Emma. She was sitting beside us, her arm in a sling, the soft whir of her wheelchair the only sound in the room. Her face was pale, and her eyes were distant, still haunted by the trauma she had endured. But there was something different in her gaze now, something stronger. She wasn't the same little girl who had walked into that courtroom. She had faced her fears head-on and had given her testimony with courage and dignity. She had told the truth, despite how painful it was. And for that, I was proud of her. More proud than I could ever express. The courtroom was silent as we all waited, the tension thick in the air. I kept replaying the events in my mind, the moment when Karen raised the gun, when the shot rang out, when Emma fell. I kept seeing her small body crumple to the ground, the blood spreading across the playground like a nightmare that wouldn't go away. I kept hearing her voice in my head. "Daddy, it hurts." I would never forget that. The door to the jury room opened and the foreman stepped out. My heart skipped a beat. The room seemed to hold its breath. Judge Howard stood up, her gavel in hand, and the room fell into complete silence. "Will the jury please rise?" she asked, her voice steady. We all stood up. My knees felt weak, my hands shaking as I held on to Sarah for support. I could feel the weight of everyone's eyes on us, but I didn't care. I couldn't care. All that mattered now was what the jury had decided. "The jury has reached a verdict," the judge said, her voice formal but carrying an undertone of gravity. "On the charge of attempted murder in the first degree, how do you find the defendant?" The foreman cleared his throat and turned to face the judge. "Guilty," he said, his voice strong and unwavering. My breath caught in my chest. I looked over at Sarah, her eyes brimming with tears. She squeezed my hand, and for the first time in weeks I felt a glimmer of hope. "On the charge of assault with a deadly weapon on a minor," Judge Howard continued, "how do you find the defendant?" "Guilty," the foreman repeated, his voice steady, unwavering. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the weight of the verdict wash over me. It wasn't over yet, but it was a step. Justice was being served. "And on the charge of a hate crime enhancement," Judge Howard continued, "based on disability discrimination, how do you find the defendant?" "Guilty," the foreman said again. Guilty of all charges. The words hit me like a wave. Guilty. I had been so scared that the jury wouldn't see the truth, that Karen would slip through the cracks. But they had seen it. They had heard Emma's voice, her courage, her truth. They had seen through Karen's lies and manipulation. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders, a weight I hadn't realized I'd been carrying. There was still so much pain, so much healing to be done, but this was a start. Karen would pay for what she did. Judge Howard looked at Karen, her face stern. "Mrs. Whitmore, you are hereby remanded into custody. You will be sentenced in 2 weeks, but the jury's verdict is clear. You will be held accountable for your actions." Karen's face remained impassive as she was escorted out of the courtroom by the bailiffs, but I could see a flicker of something behind her eyes. Was it fear, regret, or was she just resigned to the fact that her time had come? I didn't care. Whatever she felt didn't matter anymore. What mattered was that Emma was going to be okay. As the courtroom emptied, Sarah wrapped her arms around Emma, pulling her close. "You did it, baby," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "You were so brave. I'm so proud of you." Emma buried her face in Sarah's shoulder, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I was scared, Mommy," she whispered. "But I wanted to help. I wanted to protect Marcus." "You did," I said softly, kneeling beside them. "You protected him. You protected all of us. And you're so strong, Emma. I'm so proud of you." For the first time in weeks, I saw a small glimmer of peace on Emma's face. It was only a flicker, but it was enough to give me hope that she could heal, that we all could. What does justice mean to you? When is it enough, and when do you feel like it's been served? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts. 2 years have passed since that terrible day on the playground. Life hasn't returned to normal, and I'm not sure it ever will. Emma is 9 now, a little older, a little stronger, but the scars are still there. The ones on her shoulder have healed, but the emotional ones? Those run deep. She still has nightmares. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night to the sound of her sobbing, her small body trembling in the dark. I rush to her side, holding her close, whispering reassurances that she's safe. It's always the same, a flash of the gun, the sound of the shot, and the panic that follows. But over time, the nightmares have lessened, though the fear still lingers. Emma has become an advocate, speaking at schools about disability awareness and anti-bullying programs. She stands tall, her voice steady and clear, sharing her story with others. I never imagined my daughter would be in the spotlight, speaking out about something so painful, but she does it with such grace and strength. She's turned her trauma into something powerful, something that can help others. I'm proud of her. More proud than I could ever express. But sometimes I still see the shadow of that day in her eyes. She's learning to live with it, to keep moving forward, but it's not easy. Marcus, now 11, is still trying to find his way. He struggles with the belief that his disability is a burden, that his wheelchair makes him a problem for those around him. It breaks my heart to see him feel that way. He's still a little boy at heart, full of wonder and curiosity, but there's a quiet sadness in him, a doubt I can't quite erase. We've tried everything, therapy, support groups, anything that might help him understand that his disability doesn't define him. But it's a slow process. Marcus has started writing poetry about his experiences. Some of it is heartbreaking, raw with the pain of living in a world that isn't always kind. But some of it is beautiful, a glimpse into his soul, a soul that still longs for acceptance, for love, for belonging. Sarah and I are healing, too. Slowly. The stress of the past years has taken its toll, but we're learning to lean on each other more than ever. We've moved to a new neighborhood, one without an HOA, one where people don't try to tear us apart. In this new place, we've found something that feels like peace. The neighbors are kind, accepting, and open-minded. It's a fresh start for us. But even here, there's always that nagging thought, that shadow of what we went through. We're still learning to trust again, still learning to let go of the anger and fear that consumed us. We filed a civil lawsuit against Karen Whitmore, her insurance company, and the HOA for failing to act on her harassment and discrimination. We won. The money went into trust funds for Emma and Marcus's futures, and we donated a significant portion to disability rights organizations. It didn't erase the pain, but it felt like a small victory in a long war. The HOA was dissolved. New community guidelines were established with strict anti-discrimination clauses to ensure that what happened to us would never happen again. Karen's house was sold, and the proceeds went to victim compensation. I remember the look on Sarah's face when we heard that. Relief, a sense of justice served. But even then, there was no satisfaction in it. The damage had already been done. Karen Whitmore is now in maximum security prison, where she belongs. She was attacked twice by other inmates, both times by mothers who had heard what she did to Emma. I won't lie. It's hard not to feel a sense of justice in that, but I don't revel in it. I never wanted her to suffer. I wanted her to face the consequences of her actions. But I never wished for her to be broken the way she broke us. She's in protective custody now, isolated from the rest of the prison population, and I don't feel sorry for her, not after what she did to my family. She may be in a cage, but it's nothing compared to the one she built for us. Last week, Emma asked if we could visit a playground. Not the one where she was shot. That one had been demolished and turned into a memorial garden, but a new one across town. It wasn't just the idea of going to the playground. It was about taking that next step, about reclaiming something that had been taken from her. Sarah and I exchanged a look. "Are you sure?" I asked, unsure if she was ready. Emma nodded. "I miss the swings," she said quietly. "And I want Marcus to be able to play too. I don't want that mean lady to take that away from us forever." We went. It was a Sunday afternoon, and the playground was full of children, laughing, playing, carefree. The sounds were familiar, comforting. Emma hesitated at the entrance, her hand gripping mine a little too tightly. She glanced at Marcus, waiting for his approval. "We can leave any time you want," I reassured her. Emma took a deep breath. Then she let go of my hand and walked to the swing set. She sat down slowly, gripping the chains. I could see the hesitation in her eyes, but I could also see the determination. Sarah pushed Marcus's wheelchair next to her, and he reached out to hold her hand. "Together?" Emma asked. "Together," Marcus agreed, and they swung. In that moment, it felt like everything had come full circle. My two beautiful, brave children, reclaiming the simple joy that had been stolen from them. Emma's laughter rang out, genuine and free, and Marcus's face lit up with the kind of joy I hadn't seen in months. Sarah leaned against me, tears streaming down her face. "Happy tears this time," she whispered. "We made it." "We did," I said softly, my arms around her. "We're going to be okay." What's the hardest part about healing from trauma? How do you take those first steps toward reclaiming the joy that's been taken from you? Let me know in the comments below. 6 weeks after the trial, I received a letter from the prison. The return address was from the maximum security facility where Karen Whitmore was being held, and for a brief moment I hesitated before opening it. I'd never imagined I'd hear from her again, not after the trial, not after everything she'd put our family through. I ripped the envelope open, my fingers trembling slightly. The letter inside was simple, just a few lines of text written in jagged handwriting. I'm sorry for what I did. I know I can never undo the pain I caused, but I need you to know that I regret it every day. I have only a few months left. I would like to meet with you and your family to beg for your forgiveness before I die. My heart stopped. I stared at the words on the page, my mind reeling. Karen Whitmore, the woman who had destroyed our family, the woman who had shot my daughter, was asking for forgiveness? It felt wrong. It felt hollow. After everything, after all the pain she had caused, I wasn't sure I could ever forgive her. Not for what she did to Emma, not for what she tried to do to Marcus. The scars she left on them both ran deep, and I wasn't sure they would ever fully heal. But there was something about the letter that pulled at me. A part of me, a small part, wanted to understand. Why? Why had she done it? Why had she harbored such hatred? Was it really just fear, as she claimed in her defense? Or was there something darker inside her? Something twisted that led her down the path to violence? I put the letter down, my mind racing. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know if I was ready to face her again, to see her for what she truly was, a broken woman who had caused so much damage. But Sarah thought differently. Maybe this is something we need to do, Daniel, she said one evening as we sat together, the letter between us. Her voice was quiet, but there was something in her eyes, a softness, a sense of closure that I hadn't felt. Not for her, but for us to let go, to move on. I didn't say anything at first. I just stared at the letter, my hands clenched into fists at my sides. But I knew Sarah was right. We'd been through so much, carried so much pain. Maybe it was time to let go of the anger. After much deliberation, we made the decision. We would go to the prison. We would face Karen, and we would find out what was left of the woman who had destroyed our peace. A week later, we arrived at the prison. The walls loomed tall and cold, and as we walked through the gates, the weight of everything that had happened pressed down on me once again. Emma was with us, her face pale but resolute. Marcus, too, had insisted on coming, though he still struggled with the idea of facing the woman who had tried to take away his sister's life. We were ushered into a sterile gray room. Karen was brought in, shackled and escorted by a guard. I barely recognized her. The woman who had once stood tall, full of arrogance and control, now looked fragile. Her hair was thin, completely gray, and her once pristine features were hollowed out by illness. The cancer had ravaged her. She sat down across from us, her hands trembling as they rested on the table. Her eyes were empty, haunted by the weight of her actions. She didn't speak at first. Instead, she just looked at us, at Emma, at Marcus, at Sarah, at me, and I could see the regret, the shame reflected in her eyes. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice weak, raspy. "I know that's not enough. I know that's just words. But I am so sorry. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I need you to know that I was wrong, that I was driven by hatred, and I destroyed everything for you." Emma's hand tightened around mine as she sat beside me. I could see the pain in her eyes, the struggle to find words. She had been so brave, so strong in the face of everything that had happened. But now, as she faced the woman who had caused her so much pain, I saw something different in her, a quiet sadness, a part of her that had never fully healed. Karen turned to her then, her eyes brimming with tears. "Emma, I'm so sorry. I never should have hurt you. You were just a little girl standing up for your brother. You were so brave, and I took that from you. I took your innocence. I'll never be able to make that right." Emma said nothing at first. She just stared at Karen, her eyes searching for something, some kind of truth, some reason, some spark of humanity. I could see the turmoil inside her, but then, slowly, she spoke. "I forgive you," she said, her voice steady but small. "Not because you deserve it, but because I deserve peace. I won't carry hate in my heart the way you did." Her words were calm, yet they held a weight I hadn't expected. Emma wasn't doing this for Karen. She was doing it for herself. To let go of the anger. To release herself from the chains that had held her captive for so long. And in that moment, I realized just how strong my daughter had become. Karen sobbed, her tears falling freely now. She reached across the table, but there was no one to reach back. "Thank you," she whispered, barely audible. "Thank you for giving me this. I don't deserve it, but thank you." We didn't stay much longer. There was nothing more to say. We had faced the woman who had caused us so much pain, and now we could walk away knowing that the past was behind us. But it wasn't about forgiving her. It was about forgiving ourselves. As we left the prison, Emma held my hand tighter, her grip warm and steady. I looked down at her, and for the first time in a long while I saw a light in her eyes. A light that had been dimmed for so long, now shining bright again. "Are you okay?" I asked her softly. "I think so," she said, her voice strong. "I'm ready to move on, Daddy. I'm ready to be okay." And with that, we walked into the future, together, as a family, stronger than before. Forgiveness can be so difficult after someone has hurt us deeply. Do you think it's possible to truly forgive someone who has wronged you? Why or why not? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. 2 years had passed since that fateful day in the playground, and though the scars were still there, our family had started to rebuild. The road to recovery had been long and difficult, but as I looked at my children, I could see the glimmer of hope returning. Emma was no longer that terrified little girl who had been shot in cold blood. She was brave, stronger than ever, and even though she still had moments of fear, she faced every day with the courage that I could only dream of. Marcus, too, had grown. He still struggled with the weight of his disability, but he had found his voice, found a community that supported him, and found a way to be proud of who he was. And Sarah, my wife, my rock, had stood by me through everything. We had survived the unimaginable, and though the pain would never fully fade, we had found a new sense of peace, a new beginning. We moved out of the neighborhood we had once called home, away from the pain, away from Karen's legacy. The new neighborhood was quieter, more accepting, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like we could breathe again. But even in this new chapter, I knew the story wasn't over. Karen's actions would always be a part of our past, but they wouldn't define our future. We found strength in each other, in our family, in the love that bound us together. We would always carry the lessons we had learned about resilience, about standing up for what's right, and about the power of love and forgiveness. And as we walked forward hand in hand, we knew that we had won. Not because of a verdict or a prison sentence, but because we had taken back what was ours, our peace, our joy, and our family. What does true strength look like to you? Is it in surviving, in forgiveness, or in something else? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below.